This should be called the Fishback discount. That's the guy who came up with it. It came from James Fishback, an investor who's one of the advisors to DOGE. And he said, you know what we should do? When we save all this money, we should give some of it back to the American family. Let's do 20%. We hit our $2 trillion target. That'll be $5 grand each. Sounds great. Musk said, I'll take it to president. So with the president, he loves the idea. Remember during the pandemic, he wanted to sign everybody's check. It wasn't even his money. It won't be this time either. But what a great idea. Can they do it? Should they do it? Let's bring in the man who deserves the credit for the idea, James Fishback. There he is. Could you have ever imagined when you first suggested this idea that you would be here with me discussing why President Trump is saying that this is now definitely going to happen?
Well, Chris, good evening. It is a humbling and honoring day to have the president's endorsement on this idea. I'm appreciative of the credit, but I got to tell you the truth. The credit goes to President Trump. DOGE, this savings would not be possible without his leadership. We put it to paper, but President Trump is going to be the one to execute it, and he deserves the credit for it.
So, James, Bill O'Reilly doesn't want the check. I want the check. I'll take his check, too. I don't know how it works. But here's the thing. As you know, right, you're an investor, and you know when you sit at the table, people want you to underpromise and overdeliver, okay? The idea, why? Because then they're happy with the surprise. Here, isn't there a concern that setting that target of $2 trillion is way too high, and that people think they're going to get $5 grand, but now if you don't get the $2 trillion, they don't get the $5 grand?
Well, it's interesting, Chris. I don't think it's actually too high. I think it's totally reasonable. But here's the thing. The DOGE dividend check that President Trump endorsed today, that is going to help us get the $2 trillion, and here's why. We're going to incentivize everyday Americans, whether they're in East Palestine or in East Baltimore, to step up and say, there's waste, there's fraud, there's abuse in my community. Report it to DOGE. Why? Because the more money the DOGE saves, the bigger the DOGE dividend check is. Chris, look at how successful DOGE has been under Trump's leadership, with just Elon Musk and a dozen engineers eating Chick-fil-A and drinking Red Bull, sleeping in the office. Now imagine deputizing 100 million Americans to be the eyes and ears on the ground. When I was growing up, I took my grandfather, a World War II vet, to the VA for his checkups. And I got to tell you, I saw waste, I saw fraud, I saw abuse. I didn't have DOGE to report it to, and I didn't have an incentive to report it. That's not the case with the DOGE dividend. Every American can step up, report fraud and abuse to DOGE directly via X, and we'll see the savings go up, hit $2 trillion, and we'll see the checks dispersed next summer. And absolutely, President Trump's name and signature should be on it, because this would not have been possible without his leadership.
I like the idea, obviously, of finding waste, fraud, and abuse, and I like to see something, say something extension. As you know, there are lots of different places people can go to alert the government to what's going on. Whether or not they do anything about it is where you're promising that DOGE will be different. My other question is, isn't the point, though, what Musk brought up later in the day after the first flush of this idea, which is this has got to go towards the fiscal crisis that this country is in. Everybody wants a check, of course. I'm not saying no check. But what matters more? Sending a check to people or lowering the deficit and trying to make a dent in the trillions and trillions that we owe in debt?
We can do both. We absolutely can do both, Chris. We're $37 trillion in debt, which is why our proposal calls for 80% of that going to pay down the debt and only 20% going directly to taxpayers. Let's not forget, this isn't a handout. This was taxpayers' money that was sent to D.C. in the first place. It wasn't sent to D.C. to then be quickly sent to Myanmar for a DEI musical or Colombia for a transgender opera. It was sent to D.C. to support Americans. And guess what? The American heartland is crumbling. Our roads and bridges are in despair, and veterans everywhere you look are being denied essential health care. And so the American people deserve compensation, deserve restitution. That's the first point. The second point is we need to restore the trust between taxpayer and her government. We can never balance the budget if the taxpayer feels cheated. And guess what? They do, given what DOGE has exposed in just the past month. Chris, we're 1 month into DOGE, and under Trump's leadership, we've already saved $55 billion. Let's let this experiment run for another year and a half. get to $2 trillion, and send every American a check for $5,000 saying, we are back, the government is accountable, respectful, and honest again. That is what the golden age is all about.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.